It's popular these days to talk about boring businesses.
How do you make a ton of money in boring businesses? Well, here's 5 boring business billionaires.
Boring business ideas that can make you a ton of money. First one, funeral services.
Ask the stewardess what the owner of the jet does for a living. They tell me they have boring businesses in things like waste management, or that they started a software company that helps mortgage brokers.
You know what? You watch these videos or you see the titles and you think, wow, here is some really original thinking. But what's so disappointing is go do a quick Google search or look in ChatGPT for boring businesses or businesses that never fail, and you're probably going to find those lists are very similar, if not exactly the same, as what you're seeing all these gurus putting out as shocking new information. Well, I'm gonna do a segment today. It's not necessarily on boring businesses. Some people might think these are boring, but these are certainly, in my opinion, under the radar. If you look for boring businesses, maybe 1 or 2 of these will be on the list, but not all 5 will. So stick around and see what you think as to whether or not you really think they're boring, or you think they're under the radar, or both. Hi, I'm Nick McLean with 4 Pillars Investors. I consider myself one of the most boring guys in private equity. And what better topic for a boring guy like me to talk about than boring businesses? I've been buying businesses for about 20 years now, and I stay away from anything sexy. Tech, software, it's great. It can make a ton of money, far more so than maybe a small mom and pop manufacturing firm. But for better or for worse, that's not what interests me. What businesses interest me are the ones that nobody really know about, the ones that you drive by on your way to work and don't even give a second thought to. I don't know why I like those, but I do. The first 2 are related to home services. The first one is pest control. We all have experience, I'm sure, many times a month, or at least many times a year, folks coming to the door and asking if they can spray for bugs. Well, I don't necessarily always love the intrusion, but it is, in my opinion, a valuable service that I would not want to do myself. Additionally, once you sign up a customer, that customer usually sticks around. At least from my perspective, I'm not out there calling 5 different pest control companies every month to see who's going to give me the best deal or when they can come out. I just want to have a pest control company that I can use reliably, that's going to show up and keep my home free of pests. For that reason, once you land a customer, they tend to stick around. Additionally, it's like I said, it's not something that I want to do myself. On top of that, the barriers to entry are relatively low. For those reasons, it's, in my opinion, a nice little business. Now, there aren't necessarily going to be hundreds of pest control companies for sale in your area. Is it something you might want to start up? Maybe, maybe not. But ignoring some of those dynamics, when I think about businesses that have staying power, when I think about businesses that aren't at the top of everyone's mind, but they still want to use the service, pest control is right there. Another home service I want to talk about is lawn care and maintenance. Earlier on, after I got married, I was out there every week mowing the grass, edging. I even bought a fertilizer spreader and all that. However, as I got older, had kids, I realized that if I wanted the yard to look nice, then I was going to have to pay somebody to do it. Even though the business is somewhat seasonal, you're not going to mow your grass in the cold months. Same thing with fertilizer treatment and whatnot. They still can be nice businesses, because I feel like once you get used to having somebody mow your yard every week and take care of the fertilizer and whatnot, it's really hard to go back. On top of that, at least in the Midwest, a lot of those companies can keep their crews employed by doing things such as snow removal, or even expanding into tangential service lines such as Christmas tree lighting. I know in my area, Christmas tree lighting can be pretty competitive, and it's a huge moneymaker, especially when you consider that some of these crews would be idle or even out of work if they weren't able to perform that service. One more service area is sprinkler systems. As new home divisions are being built, almost always, or most of them, are going to require in-ground irrigation. That's another service line that these lawn care companies can make. It's not, again, sexy, and in the summer, it can be really hot depending on the climate of where you live, but they tend to be pretty reliable companies. And on top of being reliable companies in terms of profitability, if you can apply some marketing savvy in terms of getting your name out there more effectively than just the guy that goes door to door or has just been doing it for a long time, there's a real potential to grow very quickly. All those reasons are why I think lawn care is an attractive business that flies under the radar for most. Now, this next one is kind of a home service, but also it's related to businesses as well, and that is disaster recovery. Disaster recovery could be from wind, from water, anything really. In the period of time in which we're living, in which there's a lot more weather events, a lot more calamities, if you will, I don't see the need for disaster recovery doing anything but increasing over time. It's not as stable or not as much of a recurring nature as something like pest control or lawn care. However, when you need disaster recovery, you need it right then, and there's the potential to charge a premium price for something that in many circumstances will be relatively low skill. Now, of course, there's going to be more skill required whenever you need to determine if the drywall needs to be replaced, or if you get in there and you see that there's existing mold or whatever the case may be. So certainly there are examples where a higher skill level technician would be required. But I guess the good news for the company in those examples is that those are going to be higher dollar fixes and higher dollar repairs. Disaster recovery, in my opinion, is a pretty safe business, albeit one that people probably don't want to think about too much because they don't want to think about having a disaster. The next one is definitely a consumer-oriented business, but it's maybe not the consumer you had in mind. That consumer is the pet. In this day and age, I don't know if you guys are on Facebook or Instagram. I know you're on YouTube if you're watching this video, but I'll see posts or memes or whatever that talk about how people like animals far more than any person in their life. I think some people are partially joking when they make those posts, but I think a lot of people are not joking at all. They love their pet more than anybody in their life, which I'm not gonna opine on whether or not I think that's good or bad. I do think it's interesting. But with people being so enamored and so in love with their pets, pet services, specifically non-veterinary, just due to the licensing requirements and whatnot, I think is a very attractive segment. Over the past few years, I've started to see an increased incidence of mobile pet grooming vans and cars and whatnot. I see a lot more emphasis on grooming, on pet hotels or whatever you want to call them, boarding, if you will. I'm not sure what the right mix is in terms of what services to offer, what services not to offer, whether you need to be mobile or having just a brick and mortar will be good enough. So it really depends on, if you're trying to buy a business, it's going to depend on what exists in your area, what comes up for sale, that type of thing. But to the extent that you're able to find a business that has a reliance on people's fondness for animals, I think that it's going to be a pretty stable business and one that you would be able to grow, especially if they're not pursuing all of the product lines that I mentioned. Now for this last one, we're gonna move beyond boring and maybe get to the point of being painful. And what I mean by that is it deals with insurance. Now, I'm not talking about health insurance. Really what I'm talking about is property and casualty insurance, P&C, typically only for businesses. Not, like I said, it's not only not sexy, it's not only not boring, it's something that most people just don't want to deal with. Who wants to pay insurance? Nobody does, because a lot of times you don't need it. And when you do need it, it's usually a pretty bad situation. Sometimes it's just a roof or something like that occurs every once in a while. But a lot of times, if you're having to file an insurance claim as a business, things are not going well. That being said, insurance brokerages can be very very profitable businesses. The barriers to entry in terms of the financial stability and the licensing, all the challenges associated of actually putting in a policy in place, it's very profitable, but it's very profitable because there's a lot of risk. As you look at an insurance brokerage, sure, the broker is at risk of being negligent in what policies they put in place and whatnot. But in terms of the actual damage or whenever the insurance policy comes into play, that's up to the carrier, not the broker. Since the carriers are so profitable, they're willing to pay a lot to brokers in order to place various policies. All I know is that I've gone to coffee or lunch with insurance brokers, and they're typically dressed very nicely. They typically drive very nice cars, and they typically live in very nice areas. If that's what happens for the typical insurance broker, then they're probably doing well, and that brokerage as a whole is probably doing well if they can afford to pay their brokers that much. Not necessarily a fun one to talk about at a cocktail party, but a business that is not going anywhere and a business that can be very profitable. So in talking about these businesses, kind of hinted at the fact that maybe these would be good to buy or that they're profitable and whatnot. But the reason why I wanted to talk about a little of this is that I do think buying a business is one of the best ways to generate wealth. And if you want to generate wealth and you want to buy a business, then you might as well buy businesses that are very profitable and very stable. That's not always the best criterion or the only criterion to use when evaluating businesses, but that's why I created a whole course on how to buy a business, from setting yourself up as the person that the seller wants to sell their business to sourcing deals, to modeling the transaction, to actually getting it financed. All of that is covered and more in this course on how to buy a business. I've been doing this for 10 years. I've been following exactly what I put in the course. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't do this because I just think I just want to spread my knowledge and let everyone prosper. I'm definitely doing it from a self-interested standpoint. Not only is the course not free, so I might make a little bit of money there, but more importantly, I almost always am trying to find people to do deals with. And if I can help people buy more businesses, then I might have the potential to be a partner with some of them on those deals. So again, I wanted to make this course as good as possible because I want people going through it to find good deals to buy, not only so that they can generate wealth, but so I can be a part owner of some of those businesses and participate in the success that they have. If you'd like to learn more, go to the website, nick4pillars.com. And if what you see there is interesting, then I encourage you to book a call. Regardless, thanks for watching and stay tuned for the next one.